Hey guys, welcome back. Quick update on the 66 Nova and progress we have made over the last week or so. Interior's glued together, it's all done and ready to go in the body and fit the chassis when we get to that stage. Did flocking or embossing powder on the carpets in the back parcel shelf. Turned out really good. I'm really happy with this embossing powder. Going to use more of this. Seats are in place, seat belts are there. Did the chrome trim around the shifter console. The dashboard is finished as well. We black faced the gauge faces, the surrounds, and just used a diluted gloss white. It's kind of a whitewash for the gauges, just to kind of keep some detail in the gauges and just thin that paint down a little bit to not lose all the detail in the gauges. What else did we do? Oh, we first time we tried using pins as door locks on the door panels. Just drilled a hole, cut the pins off, and glued them down through the upper part of the door panel. And yeah, interior is looking pretty good. What I use for embossing powder on my interiors is, it's put out by Ranger. This is the color that I used on the interior. This Nova, it's gunmetal. I've got probably 8 or 10 different colors from them so far, and just started using this stuff. It's pretty good. I bought it off of Amazon, and they range anywhere from, well, in Canada, anywhere from about $6.50 to $7.50, $8 a container, and it gives you quite a bit. You've got 52 ounces or 15 grams, but it goes a long way. And to apply it, I just use ordinary wood glue or craft glue and thin it down with some water, and apply it with a paintbrush and sprinkle it on really heavy. Let it sit for, half an hour, and then gently tap the interior or door panels, whatever you're doing, off. And what I do also to seal it is I use once it's dry for a day or two, I go back over it and spray it with hairspray, just a non-scented hairspray, just to make sure I don't have a bunch of little floaty embossing powder pieces floating all over the freaking place. And it works really good. One thing we're going to try on this model is we're going to try and simulate hose clamps this time. We're not going to use braided wire on this car. We might do it on the couple other projects I got coming down the pipe that I'm still waiting for some more parts and wheels from Steve Zimmerman. But what we're going to do is we're going to simulate hose clamps. And what I'm trying is this stuff here. Hang on one sec. We've got some, get rid of the glare, we've got some 0.3 millimeter or 0.15 inch solder, and I use this for a lot of things. Brake lines off the master cylinder. I also use it sometimes when I go crazy and do chassis detail as brake lines down to the front and rear wheels. It's a nice scale, and it's pretty scale correct for these 1/25, 1/24 scale models. It's really fine. It's very pliable. It's easy to handle and mold to whatever shape that you want to twist it and turn it in. But what we're going to try in the Nova is use some of this for rad hose and heater hose clamps. I know you can buy different photo etch stuff, but I find photo etch is, by the time you cut it and try and bend it around stuff, it's still pretty stiff. So what I do with this solder is I take my X-Acto knife, cut a length of solder, and just run my X-Acto knife off the shiny flat side along it, and I do it on both sides and just draw the knife away and apply a little bit of pressure just to try and get it flat, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. And then once I do that, I take a piece of wire that I'm using, or just a sample from the same size that I'm using on the motor. This is going to be the upper rad hose, and very gently take it and wrap it around like so. And once I got it started, go around the back side and use my fingernail to get it tight against the hose, and then pull this back over. And once I get to that stage, then I see about where the joint's going to be, which I'm not quite there yet. And we'll take our snippers, and then we just snip it off. Where are you? There you are. Like so. And give her a little tweak. And there we got a little hose clamp. And it's still loose enough that you can slide it around. And what I do now is I gently take that off of this piece of hose. That's the same, this one particularly is the upper and lower rad hose on the Nova. And I'll gently pull that off. And then we'll take our hose from our motor and line it up and try to slide it back on. And then once we get our our hose in place and whatever twist and turn we're gonna do on it, I just glue my hose in place, and then once that's set, just slide my clamp down. And once it's in the model, then I just use some crazy glue and just do a little dab on there just to hold it in place. So it's a simple, easy way to simulate hose clamps if you want to try that, guys. We're trying it on the 66, and so far it looks pretty good. It's working out all right. And I did the same thing for the heater hose. This is just my sample one. I just formed my clamp around, but we'll show you the progress on the motor in a second. I want to show you a couple other things. Next thing, what we're working off of here is a piece of tempered glass, and I just picked that up from the hardware store or kitchen supply or in the kitchen aisle at Canadian Tire or what have you. I use it for cutting all my photo etch, and when I do my seat belts where I flatten some solder and use the knurling on the blade to get the pattern that I get on the seat belts. And then just take a pair of flat nose needle nose and crimp the ends just to simulate a buckle. But I roll out the solder on this glass to get it so it doesn't it keeps it flat and get enough pressure. I find the cutting board, the matting that I use to build on generally is too soft. So I picked up a piece of tempered glass, and that's what I cut my photo etch on and roll my seatbelt solder out on. What do we got else? Wire for wiring on motors. This stuff here is, hang on. It's a wire wrapping wire, and it's a AW G30 gauge, And I bought this off of eBay. I think it was like $6 and free shipping. But it gives you 2, 4, 6, 8 different colors. And I use this for a lot of wiring on my engines, especially for doing distributors. It seems to be the same gauge as you get in wiring kits from Detail Master and those kind of guys. But this will be a lifetime supply of wire that I use for about $6.50 from off of eBay. It's good stuff. The other thing that I use for wiring on the engines is it's a jewelry wire, and I forget the gauge that this is, but it's a real fine wire, and you'll see, you can get an idea of the gauge of it if you look at my engine wiring on the 70.5 Camaro, where I did the throttle body and MSD wiring and alternator wiring, is this gauge. And I bought that off of eBay. Comes in a pack of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 different colors. And I forget again what gauge it is, but it's, if you look for jewelry wire or beading wire on eBay, you'll come across it. And it's a real fine wire. This is really good stuff too. What else have we got? That's kind of it for like stuff. Hang on, we'll show you the progress on the engine. Hang on. Too low. Alright, motor's coming along pretty good. It's basically made up my my hose clamps for hoses. I've got the upper one that's going to go to the rad. I've got the bottom one glued in place to go down at the intake manifold. Lower rad hose is done, and I've got the clamp that's going to go up against the rad in place so I can slide it in to the radiator when I get to that stage of gluing the wire in. Heater hoses are glued in place. I've got 2 clamps down there for them, and I've made up my other 2 and slid them on here. And once I get the heater hoses glued into the firewall, then I can slide my clamps into place. As I mentioned, we're going to keep this one fairly straightforward, just a single barrel or single 4-barrel carb on this one. No power steering, but we're going to add that better larger brake booster on the thing. Distributor's all wired up, and just finished gluing all the spark plug wires in place, and we've got our Detail Master spacers on the wires as well. And coils wired up. Just got my brake booster wire glued in place to go up to the brake booster when we get to that stage. Did a little throttle return spring on it as well. And how I do that is I actually take the wrapping off of this, off of this wire wrap, and use the core of it and just wind it around just a small straight pin, like so. Oop. Come on, focus. You can do it. And just use that for a throttle return spring. We still have to run our throttle cable back to firewall, but that'll be a little later stage. Use Molotow again on the crank and water pump pulleys and on the alternator pulley. Alternators wired up with that real fine jewelry wire that I was mentioning to you. What else? Headers. Of course, once I got the engine test fitting in the chassis and the engine lowered enough to get hood clearance so far. Sorry. Found that the headers that come with the kit are going to be way dragging on the ground, so same story, we had to make some headers out of solder for this baby, and started to finish off the collectors on it, and I still got another transition to get down to the size for exhaust. We're going to run solder from the headers back to the tail end of the car, and got some mufflers out of my stash of goodies that we got, and yeah, so we got those to finish off the collectors. What else? Oh, we're gonna run an air cleaner on this, and it's Parts by Parks air cleaner, and that'll finish off the motor quite nice, I think, and should hopefully still fit under the hood once we're all done here. What else did we add to it? Oh, we used a small resistor for a fuel filter on this. Come on, see if we can get this thing to focus. Now we run, it's going to be a dual feed carburetor. Now we've got a couple lines running out of the carburetor up to the fuel line, fuel filter, and the fuel line runs, of course, down to the fuel pump. Yeah, that's kind of about the state of everything, guys. Body's still the same. It's just sitting over there. That'll be one of the next stages once we get this motor mounted in chassis and run through a couple more dry fits, and we'll start cleaning up seam lines and get that body ready for paint. Should be hopefully next week we'll get at that, and get a bunch of other little things fitted up and finalized. And we've got rad fan glued in place on the rad support, and drilled a couple of holes in there for our upper and lower rad hose, so that's ready to go when we get to that stage. And I guess that's about where we are with this thing. It's come along pretty good. I'm really happy with it. It's turning out pretty good. Anyway, guys, thanks for staying tuned, and just a quick update on what's going on with the 66, and we'll talk to you soon. See ya.